We'll jump right into tonight's topic, but first, a quick ask for everyone here to click on the link that's coming in the chat who just entered the room. It's just a survey to tonight's webinar, and we really value your feedback, so please let us know. Get some ideas for some future topics, and let us know what you thought about tonight's program. So many of you already may know me, but for some new friends in the room, my name is Sarah Redden, and I'm one of IPC's outreach and program coordinators. So before we jump into tonight's topic, on the next slide, we'll just have a very brief tech orientation. Again, we please ask that you keep yourself muted during this presentation. Also, if you have to get up and move around, we ask that you turn off your camera. Again, this session is being recorded, so if you do not wish to be shown, please turn your camera off now. And last, please use the chat function as a way to ask for help should you need assistance. One of our IPC staff here tonight will do their best to assist you. So next, you'll see a lovely staff photo from our summer board retreat. What a blessing it was to be there. If you find yourself in my area, please see my contact information below. Next, we'll just take a quick look at a program lineup, as we'll begin with an opening reflection, followed by some information about our organization for any new folks in the room, and then we'll get to meet our speakers, hear their presentations, and we'll have some Q&A and close with a prayer. Now, I would like to start our program with a prayer attributed to the Ute tribe. It's perfect, I think, for this time of year and all times of the year, really. Earth, teach me. Earth, teach me quiet, as the grasses are still with the new light. Earth, teach me suffering, as old stones suffer with memory. Earth, teach me humility, as blossoms are humble with beginning. Earth, teach me caring, as mothers nurture their young. Earth, teach me courage, as the tree that stands alone. Earth, teach me limitation, as the ant that crawls on the ground. Earth, teach me freedom, as the eagle that soars in the sky. Earth, teach me acceptance, as the leaves that die each fall. Earth, teach me renewal, as the seed that rises in the spring. Earth, teach me to forget myself, as melted snow forgets its life. Earth, teach me to remember kindness, as dry fields weep with rain. So thanks for taking that moment with me. Now I just want to shift gears, just share some gratitude for the sponsors that fund our work and make this possible, as you can see on the next slide. And as we move along, you'll see for some new folks in the room, we just want to kind of explain how we fit in this really great puzzle of help between congregations, environmental organizations, and local support from government agencies and technical partners. Next, if you want to see who's partnering with us and doing this work with us, you can see a little bit more. Oh, after our Chesapeake Bay watershed almost lets this one go by, we just want to talk about how we're all connected like the bay. So what happens in your backyard happens to everyone in the area. So thanks, Rebecca, for moving us along. And this is the One Water Partnership Pledge that I was mentioning. And so this is a little map of all the congregations doing this in this area. And if you check your chat, you'll see a link to the One Water Partnership Pledge and our Faithful Green Leaders training, along with our resources on the next slide. Wonderful. So now let's delve into tonight's topic. This is a wonderful program. We're so excited to welcome Roman Arona, who is a man with remarkable versatility, making him the ideal individual to start our program tonight, with many years in the environmental field, which he'll tell us more about. He's the owner of I Am Human Media. You'll see more in the link to follow of his organization. It's a national nonprofit that develops programs to address social discourse, create community, and unite humanity through the arts. He's also a Native American performer and so much more. So I want to hand the floor over to Roman. Thank you so much for coming.
Dagoteshe, Roman Arona, Guse. Hello, my name is Roman Arona. As Sarah said, I appreciate being here and allowed to come and speak. a little bit about what I do. As we were talking about how this night would occur, I said I really wanted to just have a conversation. Um, during as we enter into the winter time for my people, that's when the storytelling comes. A lot of the indoor activities start to take place. For myself, I'm Apache, Pueblo, and Yaqui. Um, and as we move into those times, I really wanted to create some dialogue and just kind of have some conversation. Um, I know that there was some questions that you wanted to put in the chat, and I don't want to mess up what you already got going on. But if there's something that is of question, please just Sarah or whoever just interrupt, and we can kind of talk about some of those things. Um, as a native person, by culture and by upbringing and by being born into that, um, I've always seen the environment holistically. I was always brought up that everything was integral into each other. It was very much like a web, and as we look at the environment and ourselves being part of that big picture. I think sometimes as humans we forget that we are part of a bigger picture where we think that the earth should revolve around us, which to me is the wrong way to do that. A little bit about myself. Again, I'm Roman Arona. I am a trained educational a civil engineer. I have a master's as well. But as a civil engineer, I've always done environmental work. So my entire career has been environmental work. Um, I currently reside in Arizona. I'm originally from New Mexico, but currently reside in Arizona. Um, and and being here, um, well, let me back up. Sorry, I was going to go into some thought. I also sit on US EPA Region 9. I'm the co-chair for the travel program. So basically, I assist in getting a unified voice of 148 tribes out of Arizona, Nevada, and California. And I work to bring a unified voice of issues to US EPA. And so as the co-chair, I represent the travel side. The regional administrator or the deputy regional administrator will be my counterpart when one is appointed. We did have one early on as part of this administration, and they are since had left. And so right now I'm working with an acting regional administrator. Again, the region for US EPA, there's 10 regions. Region 9, again, is Arizona, Nevada, and California. I am also, by choice and by religion, I am also a Baha'i. And as a Baha'i, to me, the reason, as my parents became Baha'is, one of the things that allowed us and allowed the Baha'i faith and the native culture, it went hand in hand. There was no choose one or the other. And as a Baha'i, a lot of things are very much holistic in that same thought process, in that same revelation as my native culture, and a lot of the prophecies actually align very much. And not only that, but in some of my prophecies, they talked about the Baha'i faith, the twin prophets coming at a time, and the twin prophets in the Baha'i faith are the Bab and Baha'u'llah. So I am a Baha'i. I wanted to really kind of explore with you a little bit of what the environment means from my perspective as an indigenous person. I also, sometimes that people think that There is one way. And then, when an indigenous person is talking, when a native person is talking, that's the way that all indigenous people believe. It is not. I am not a spokesperson for any other tribal community or any other tribal person, but this is how I was brought up in my traditional ways. And um, as we start to explore this, I want to set the stage again for something that goes hand in hand as who I am, and I want to start off maybe with a quick song, and then I'll dive into some of the things that are happening as my prophecy has alluded to this time. So I'll start with an Apache song. Um, and this song is a song that I wrote, again pulling in my indigenous side, my Baha'i side, walking two worlds. As an indigenous person, we have to walk those two worlds. We walk the traditional ways, and we walk these more contemporary ways. And so this is a mix of that, and it's off one of my albums called Invocations. Yana heya edo wo heya edo wo heya edo wo Yana heya edo wo heya edo wo heya edo wo Yana heya edo wo heya edo wo heya edo wo Yana heya edo wo heya edo wo heya edo wo Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountains and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow where mention of God hath been made, and his praise glorified. Yana heya edo oh heya edo oh heya edo oh Yana heya edo oh heya edo oh heya edo oh hey yeah. So as we talk about, as I talk about my upbringings with my relationship with the land, one of the things that we were talking about prior to this, Sarah and I, as we were kind of building up to this point. One of the things that we're talking about when we reflect on the land and our relationship with it and where we stand in it, it's truly about that relationship. It's truly about being equals. The ants and those small creatures are as valuable to the big environment as we are, as the rocks are, as the land is, as the air is. Everything is in relationship to each other. And um and what we mean by that, or what I was always brought up with, that is everything is given an energy force from the creator. Everything here in the natural environment was provided for us to be able to utilize and to be able to care for. For my people, we were told before we were moved into a reservation, into two reservations, or when we I'm Chiricahua, I'm Chiricahua Apache. So if you know a little bit about the Apaches and from the Southwest, some of my people were the last of the Indian Wars, and were pulled together and taken to Florida and then eventually to Oklahoma. But there was a group of us that they didn't catch, and some of us went into Mexico and into the hiding, and then finally came out in about as early as the 1950s. We started coming back out of those mountains. They couldn't find us up there. The Mexican government was searching, but everything is in relation to each other. So the creator provided and gave humanity, gave us as indigenous people this place. this land that we were supposed to care for. So for us, our stories, our songs, our dances, everything of who we are as indigenous peoples were given to a place. And my place right now is in New Mexico, near it's called Mimbres, New Mexico, Silver City, kind of that area. And our people traveled. We moved like the wind, as they used to say for Apaches. As Geronimo actually said. Um, but but we moved with seasons, and it was important to move with seasons because as 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 Apache people, staying in one place and occupying one place and utilizing all the resources of one place would put stress on that place. So we had to move with the seasons. We moved and migrated because fruits and vegetables and game and things like that came in seasons like they do now. You look at like for example, you look at a banana and banana is grown year round. Well, I don't know that a banana should be be growing year round and be available, right? Like it should come in seasons, right? When you look at the cherry comes in at a certain time and then it goes away. And that's how the food cycle for us was. That's how the vegetable cycles and all those things that we did was very much connected to that change in weather and the change in the land. And so in the summer months and those types of things, we were up in the mountains in the high country, one to cool off, and two as protection because a lot of movement was happening at that time. When it started to get colder, we kind of came down into camps, and into the mountains. We were the mountain people, um, and so when you look at that relationship, right? You look at the rock. The rock has an energy force. The rock has a symbolism in it, and it's used. Is it maxed out at to a certain point? Yes, right? Like it can't walk, it can't talk, it can't do any of those things, but it has an energy that is utilized, and the creator gave it to us for reasons, whether that's to be utilized for mechanical uses, like as a tool, right? Or to be used again, whether that's protection or whether that was for carving or whatever that was for. And so was everything else. Without ants and without those smaller critters, we have issues with some of the things that do pass, right? Like those things have to go in and take care. There's a cycle. And so when we talk about this cycle, as indigenous people, we look at it very much like a web, like a spider web. And a lot of indigenous communities see the spider and that webbing, as a symbol of the earth in which we live in. And if you've ever seen that spider web when it's so intricate, if you take a piece of it, it changes the webbing. It changes the way in which the winds blow through it. You know, and that's how we view everything around us. The water as the bloodline of not only ourselves and the necessity as humans, but to the land. That's the source of energy and drinking, just like we have in our system, not only the water but the blood that we have, right? That that's how it's how we correspond with that. And you look at everything in that same manner. Well, there was a time, long when prophecy was given, and it talks about this time, this day and age of where we're at. And as for our people, Apache people, we talk about a time when destruction would come. We talked about the time when Mother Earth was going to be, for a lack of better words, raped and pillaged. We talked about the time when water was going to be scarce. Our prophecies talked literally about this time. Humanity would be divided. See, our prophecies talk about peace And as Apache people, everybody always tells us, oh, you are the great warriors, you are the great fighters, you are the great this, you are the great that. That we were a people of peace. The only thing we ever wanted to do was stay in our area and protect the things that the Creator put us to protect. We were the protectors of that area, of those animals, of those trees, of that water, of that land, of that air. We were the protectors of that. And that's what we were fighting against when things were starting to come and they found copper and they found gold and they were, taking, fighting for that land that doesn't belong to us. That land is all of ours. And so now we're getting to that point, as you all know, and have seen, that you're starting to see what we say is Mother Earth fighting back. And what I mean by that is you're starting to see more destruction in some of the things that are happening. You're starting to see hurricanes that are stronger. You're starting to see earthquakes that are harder. You're starting to see tornadoes that are hitting places that don't usually have them. You're starting to see all of these things because our prophecies tell us that if we as humanity don't awaken and don't change our ways, the Creator will force us to change our ways. I don't know about you all, but I do fear the Creator. I do fear the power of the Creator um, when a lesson is to be taught. And I think as humanity, we've gotten too wrapped up into money and utilizing and utilizing the earth to make the money. The resources are there for us to have and to utilize, but it's got to take a balance, right? Um, we would always say that, when you went hunting, you didn't go, and even though you saw, 100 buffalo, you didn't kill all the buffalo. You killed what you needed for sustenance for the community because that's all you needed. And so we're at a point as humanity is where we're hoarding all these things, right? We're wanting more and more and more. And at what point does that stop? At what point will that change? And so when you look at the principles of the faith and you look at the principles of as indigenous people, unity, justice, and this relationship between those things, unity and justice, because without those two things, it's completely lopsided. There is no harmony in those things. We have to be unified in our mentality to save the things that we need to save. And we have to have the justice portion of it. We have to be just in the way that we are doing the work that we're doing. And so for me, I here at Ogchin, I oversee five programs. I have two water programs that I oversee. One is a pre-treatment, not drinking water, but the pre-treatment water, groundwater and surface water. I have non-point source water that I oversee as well, and that, for those that don't understand what that means, it means there's no real source where this water comes from, and what that looks like is rain. When wastewater treatment plants discharge from the wastewater treatment plants, and because they have too much water that they can't utilize, and they discharge it, and it comes onto the community, we have to monitor that and check, is it meeting certain regulations as well. So we have to do that portion of it. We have an air program that we monitor. We are a farming community. And so, when winds are kicking up at a certain amount, our air monitors will kick in and say, hey, we need to bring it down, and so I work real close with our farming community to tell them we need to not be utilizing too much tractors or only certain things. We have a recycling program that I oversee, and a pesticide program because we are an agricultural community. So we have a pesticide program that monitors the amount of pounds and stress of pesticides that are being applied onto the various um, um, agricultural farming community or farming lands. So whatever that would be, cotton, corn, you name it. This community, does a lot of that. And so, Sarah, just give me the when it's my turn. Like I said, I really wanted to have conversation. I really wanted to talk about, some of these things. Right now, what we're seeing in indigenous communities are a lot of the health risks that are happening because of lack of water, because of poor water. This community receives water, like I said, groundwater, but we're surrounded by a city, and that city also uses that groundwater. Not only that, but that city also has what they call um, point source direct inject, where the wastewater treatment plant, again, when they don't have enough, when they have too much water, they will utilize that water to directly inject it back into the aquifer for it to mix with drinking water. And that happens a lot in a lot of different communities. Um, the other things that happen sometimes in some of these communities is when you have, and it might happen out in the Chesapeake Bay, but you have your sewage going out. Well, it wouldn't happen in the bay because you wouldn't be pulling your water, I don't think, from there. I don't think that's a fresh water, right? It wouldn't be fresh water, so that'd be salt. But you have in some of these, like in Lake Michigan, Chicago has, their treated effluent going out, but they're also pulling from that same source for drinking water, right? That's not how this was supposed to be. Traditionally, in traditional communities, for us, we had our clean water source and we had our wastewater source going to a completely different area. And we would never mix those two things. And we've gotten to the point where we have to mix those things because we need water to drink. And the reality is that this world doesn't have enough water anymore. For indigenous communities, we're seeing the loss of the food systems, the loss of the medicinal herbs, the loss of those cultural relevant items that we're seeing. And that's just due to the change in either climate, to the fact that a lot of our traditional waterways are now dammed up, and they're held so that it can be for potable water, right? And so these traditional areas that had the willows, that had the cottonwoods, that had the bear grass, that had the things that were used traditionally are now gone. And so we're seeing a lot of these threats to our cultural practices, to 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 the onslaught of what is happening around us. And so I think when I was asked, my brother put me in connection, and when I was asked about this, I think, yeah, we need to have these frank and honest conversations, because these are the things that are happening not only in your community, but it is happening in our community. And for us as indigenous people, a lot of us were moved onto reservations that didn't have the connection with the land. And so you start seeing some communities that are really poor, that have a lot of solid waste around, that have, I don't know, tires or cars that are just abandoned, and just these what look like third world countries have sitting here in the US. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is because there is no connection to that land. Our stories no longer are relevant because, again, our stories were given to us about a particular area. Our songs were given to us, our medicines, and the things that everything that we were as and are as indigenous people were to a specific area. And so when we were pulled and colonized and moved somewhere else, that connection was lost. And so when we're starting to look at some of these things, we're starting to talk about, this land back and trying to go back, um, to those traditional sites and bringing that young generation back so that they can understand what, some of these songs are actually talking about. What mountains are they referencing? You know, what are the traditional runs or the caves or those things that are relevant? Do we have any questions or anything like that that has popped up?
Actually, there was one, Roman, and I'm gonna open it back up again because I think it had to do with farming. But let me just get the language of it exactly. And one quick note. See, this is why I should have gone to the watershed slide because I think a lot of folks in our own region actually do not know it is a source because it's brackish. So it's like it supports
Oh, it is.
millions. Yeah, yeah. So it's salt and fresh. Um, the largest in the United States. And let's see, I want to make sure, yeah, it was, is there a move towards organic farming? Are you doing that now?
We do have organic farming that is happening on the community. We're also looking at some of the traditional farming and techniques to come back. And some tribes, some communities are putting those back into place. Um, where we are doing the organic farming, we're looking at the traditional farming, traditional foods, the temporary beans, the gourds that we would eat, right? Those the beans and the squashes and a lot of those different corns being reintroduced again, and to that. The community that I work for right now, a lot of the farming activities that occur here are are the are part of the economic driver for this community. So a lot of that, I would say 90%, 90, maybe even closer to 99, 95 to 99% of all the crops that are being farmed are going to market.
Oh,
So it is the economic driver for this community. This community is traditionally a farming community, and they want to continue to utilize that. So if you've heard of In-N-Out Burger, some of those potatoes in this region go to In-N-Out Burger for their fries. Frito-Lay, some of that corn is utilized in Frito-Lay's process. It's an economic driver for this community. But a lot of communities are going toward their traditional ecological knowledge bases, right? We're returning back to those things. We're returning back to utilization of creating wetlands, um, utilizing the traditional crops instead of just using landscaping, general landscaping. We're trying to integrate traditional crop landscaping. So, bringing back the bear grass so that community members that are basket makers can go out and harvest that. And then it just rejuvenates. So when you go to harvest, it will sprout a little bit stronger every single time that you go and get some of that the grass that we use for the basket making. Um, one thing that one thing that I think I mentioned it earlier, that the land, Mother Earth, the water, and that relationship with the sun and the sky and all of those things are, so integral. That's why the Mother Earth. That's why we call it Mother Earth, because it is the giver. It is the mother for all of us. It is the one who brings the food for all of us. It is the one who provides the water for all of us. And that's how sacred it is to us that we, as indigenous people, my people are matriarchal people. So, the men, the chiefs, and some of those guys that would go, the Geronimos and some of those, they were the voice piece. The women were the decision makers. And I think we need to get back to those traditional things. There's some things that we talk about that when we talk looking at traditional ecological knowledge, that's one of those things, is getting back to that woman base. And the reason the woman is so sacred in indigenous communities, and the reason when we would go to war, their women and children were not touched, was because they were the providers. Women are the first educators of us as people, as moms. They're the ones that are going to raise those children. And so that connection between mom and child is so important. But not only that, women are also the ones that live in the physical world and live in that spiritual world. Because that spirit that comes through mom when a child is made into a physical being and she's carrying that, that is that connection. And so women are very sacred in those ways. And it's about that balance, because I think women are the ones that are very much balanced. They know when to be the mama bear, and they know when to put down the warrior and be a mom. Us as men, we don't. We don't know how to pull back because we're always trying to problem solve. And a lot of the things that we do is we get into this, right? You look at the male animals, and what do the male animals do in all across this world? They're the ones who come out and basically go to war, right? The women can do that, but they choose not to as well in the wild. So we look at the deer, like for the Pascoyaki, we look at the deer as a sacred animal, not because we worship the deer. We don't worship the deer. We don't worship the eagle. We don't worship any of these animals or trees or anything else. But they give us something that we learn from. So for the Pascoyakis, for my part of my who I am, we look at the deer um, as sustenance, as clothing, but it also teaches us things. It teaches us sacrifice. It teaches us renewal when we look at the deer, when the male's antlers, they drop and they renew themselves. There's other aspects of that. The eagle, for a lot of us here in the US, and in North America, so Canada, the eagle is prominent because for us, it was the highest flying bird that we knew. And so, as the highest flying bird that we knew, that's why the eagle and the spirit of the eagle and the feathers are utilized in a lot of communities, because that's the physical being that could carry our prayers to the Creator. As you go a little further south, it's the condor that would do a lot of that. And so we don't worship the eagle, but we honor it as a messenger to the Creator.
Thank you so much, Roman. That is just so beautiful, the way you put all of that, and just reminding us even just about the sacredness of seasons and cycles. There are some more questions in the chat, but I definitely want to be respectful
Yeah.
and give my esteemed colleague the floor here. Some of you may know her. She's worked with IPC so closely as one of the founding, cornerstones of the organization. So if we could go back, thank you so much, Rebecca. And I'd love to introduce Kolya Braun-Greiner, please. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Kolya.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here. Thank you, Roman. You've certainly grounded us in your creativity and your tradition, focused on being in relationship with Mother Earth, and also caring for the whole of the Creator's creation, a whole web of life. Yes, I left IPC about 3 years ago when I retired. And my former seminary training was focused on integrating faith and ecology. And before that, I spent many years in solidarity working with Native American movements for land and tribal sovereignty. So my presentation is going to be a little different, and I think Roman's really laid an excellent foundation for our understanding. Thank you. What I'm going to invite you into is a journey with my congregation and its exploration of how to be in solidarity with Indigenous peoples and express that through our faith and action. The Seekers Church, if you could pop up that slide, please, is one of 7 small independent ecumenical churches following the 75-year tradition of the Church of the Savior and supporting ministries of peace and social and environmental justice, and rooted in the radically inclusive life and teachings of Jesus Christ. Here you see some of us at our weekly vigil for racial and ethnic justice that began in the wake of the Black Lives Matter. I'll be sharing with you the threads of my congregation's journey to weave healing and solidarity with Indigenous people, the original inhabitants of this land and these waters. I begin with this quote from Judith LeBlanc, Cato native and executive director of the Native Organizers Alliance. She says, "The 21st century struggle for Native sovereignty, racial justice, and a world without wars and violence is a struggle to shift power from the few to the power of the many, and a power shift grounded in Indigenous values of being good relatives, living with the awareness of our interconnected pasts and future." So weaving the threads of healing for reparations and solidarity in response to our interconnected past and future with Indigenous peoples is a long and creative process. So the first step is awareness building. At Seekers Church, we learned some deep truths and hard lessons about becoming allies in this social justice ministry. Our journey of gathering threads began when Lucy Slater and I, as members of Earth and Spirit Mission Group and the Racial and Ethnic Justice Ministry team, felt called to co-teach a class to introduce people to the deep and painful history of the doctrine of discovery, as well as how it is still very actively implemented today. Please show the slide of Sarah Augustine's book. So in midwinter 2024, we offered a class at Seekers School for Christian Growth based upon the book of Sarah Augustine's The Land is Not Empty, Following Jesus to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. Sarah is a Tiwa and Mennonite author and teacher, and she's also the founder of the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. Now, I'm just curious, I won't be able to see all hands, either virtually or your physical hand, about how many people actually have ever heard of the Doctrine of Discovery. Not very many, and there's usually not a surprise because we're not taught about this. Well, we learned the painful history through her book and elsewhere, that the doctrine originated with the Christian Church under the authority of Pope Nicholas V, who issued the doctrine in 1455, by which lands were deemed empty, or terra nullius, if occupied by people who were not Christian. So, through the doctrine of discovery, Christian colonizers were authorized, and I quote from the document, to invade, to search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ, wherever soever they were placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods, meaning land, property, etc., whatever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. This is a hard truth to face, and I invite us all to take a breath. So Sarah Augustine asks this poignant and prophetic question of us: how do we respond to such a doctrine, moving toward reconciliation? What does repentance look like? Our class brought it fully into the present time, shedding light on how the legacy of the doctrine of discovery is still being played out as Indigenous lands are still being occupied and stolen today by extractive industries through mining, logging, fossil fuels, just to name a few. We also connected the class learnings with how we might be advocates for current struggles of Native peoples for land rights, religious freedom, and respect for their culture. Our class inspired the following actions, each of them being a thread woven in a fabric of healing and solidarity. The first was, together with Earth and Spirit Mission Group and the Racial and Ethnic Justice Ministry team, we joined the coalition to dismantle Doctrine of Discovery and its repair network of faith communities who are committed to solidarity with Indigenous people. And you can join too. And there's going to be a link put in the chat where you can go and join if you're interested or find out more information about the repair network. To express our support, a small grant of $2,000 was designated from our domestic giving for their Land Justice Fund to support their land back efforts that Roman mentioned with Indigenous peoples. As the Dismantling Coalition says, land return is a key mechanism of affirming sovereignty to Indigenous peoples. Unfortunately, under the current unjust laws and systems of our world, that's not truly possible without transforming those systems, another core tenet of our work, which also informs our advocacy, I should say. And there's a link in the chat about the Land Back Fund, too. Currently, Seekers Church is examining our financial giving policies to include language about making reparations, which can be expressed in many different forms. So Seekers members, a few of us, attended 2 events at the Wellspring Conference Center, a blanket ceremony in April 2024 called the Mixing of the Waters. And during that ceremony, there was a group role play in which history was inverted, where Indigenous folks framed the narrative of colonization. And my friend and colleague, Lucy Slater, reported that this experience made me feel the trauma of sorrow of the Indigenous people in a new, embodied, and visceral way. And it was a blessing to be able to collectively share our experiences of new and old understandings with each other. The latter event, the Mixing of the Waters, it brought Indigenous peoples from all over the Americas together with local faith representatives to better understand each other's histories. And we were invited to plan how we could continue collaborating together by sharing our offerings and needs. In the fall of 2024, through the Repair Network, we learned that a delegation from Apache Stronghold was coming from Arizona to petition the Supreme Court to hear their case to save Oak Flat, the sacred land of the Apache, from a giant copper mine 2 miles wide and 1,000 feet deep. Please show the image of Oak Flat with Dr. Nosi's quote. We attended a worship hosted by the Festival Church and Eighth Day communities. They're also members of the Church of the Savior Network, accompanied by members of Community House Church in DC, members of the Repair Network. Seekers Church members volunteered to serve food to the delegation that had traveled all the way from Arizona to DC. And we heard Dr. Wensler Nosi, the spiritual leader of the Apache Stronghold, speak about being engaged in a spiritual battle for the earth, which is sacred, a battle for a way of life that is in harmony with earth rather than harming the only home we have. The next slide, at the Supreme Court. The next day, September 11th, 2024, we attended a multi-faith prayer vigil in front of the Supreme Court when a petition to hear their case was submitted. The Reverend William Barber summed up their case for religious freedom. He described it as thus: destroying Oak Flat would be like giving a mining company permission to destroy the National Cathedral. Meanwhile, we continued to strengthen our relationship with the local tribe of the Piscataway Indian Nation. And in March, Lucy and I met with Arv Apache, principal emissary of the Piscataway Indian Nation at that time, from whom we learned that one of their priorities was to develop a community cultural center that would offer intergenerational space for learning and sharing their cultural traditions and values. So Seekers designated a small grant of funds, $2,000, to the Piscataway Indian Nation to support that priority as an expression of our solidarity. And in June, we were invited to join Adam Green, our new emissary contact there, to meet virtually with him along with Arf Apache and Mark Tayak, the 29th generation chief, who affirmed our new friendship. Please show the slide with the poster of Oak Flat event. In August, another thread woven into this tapestry of action, Seekers hosted a public educational event at our church about saving Oak Flat with Kirsten and Merwin DeMello, who had visited the sacred land and people of Oak Flat. We learned from them more about the spiritual significance of Oak Flat, where rites of passage and ceremonies and native plants have been, for medicine purposes, have been there for generations, along with 800-year-old oak trees who live there. This fight to preserve that sacred space for generations has been going on for a long time and will continue. Next slide, the Defend the Holy event. Our most recent expression of solidarity was when 3 members of our congregation attended the Defend the Holy speaking event at Cedar Lane Unitarian Church in Bethesda, the last stop of the nationwide tour Dr. Wensler Nossi gave on September 22nd. Next slide with images of the Cedar Lane event. And both emissaries, Apache and Green, were present to welcome him with an interfaith gathering of religious leaders, and the sanctuary was full of attendees from all different faiths. We continue to pray and advocate for their sacred land to be saved from desecration as it works through the court system. Lastly, the image of Dr. Wensler Nossi, who called all people of faith to proclaim their own tradition, which affirms that earth is sacred. In closing, these are some of the learnings about solidarity with Native peoples and what it looks like in action. First, learn about the heinous history of colonization and its ongoing impacts on Native Americans today. And keep informed of current advocacy efforts that support solidarity with Native Americans, groups like the Native Organizers Alliance, the Lakota People's Law Project, which is an intertribal network now, or Creation Justice. Secondly, learn who are the original inhabitants of your region and where they live now. Thirdly, build relationships with them by showing up at events that local Native Americans are holding, like powwows, or through relationships with them at events to which you've been invited to attend. For example, we learned through the Repair Network that there was an American Indian movement. The local chapter was gathering for celebration in February about the freedom of Leonard Peltier, who had been imprisoned for 50 years and was pardoned by President Biden. Learn what their priorities are and choose from those which ones you will support. And then teach and share with others what you're learning. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, learn about and adopt Indigenous ways of life that theologian and Cherokee author, teacher, and author Randy Woodley describes in his book, Becoming Rooted. Indigenous is to become rooted. Indigenous people understand how to live with the land. And furthermore, in his book, Journey to Elohe, he says, Indigenous is to become intimately acquainted with the land. I'd say that sounds like what IPC is doing already and will continue to do, training people to learn about the local land and waters where they live and express their learnings with healing action rooted in their faith. Now, since November is National Native American Heritage Month, I wrote a reflection for Interfaith Partners for Chesapeake, which will appear in the November newsletter, and it will be posted with a link to the recording for this learning lab. And so I'd like to close with a prayer, the last slide. As a closing blessing, this was offered at our August event about Oak Flat. And I invite you to say it silently with me or say it to yourself aloud but muted. Teach us the power of connection to land as a holy space to commune with God, as a path of healing away from the distortions and the destruction of colonization, and as a guide to where we belong within the broader community of all living things. Reweave us into the fabric of the ecosystems in which we live, so we can reclaim our interconnectedness with all creation. May it be so through all divine power in the universe. I welcome your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kolya. That was also so beautiful. You're always so eloquent. So I'm very grateful that you wanted to share your journey with the audience. And I know everyone learned a lot and gotten inspired by both of our speakers. It's hard to believe we're almost up to the hour. I think we have time for a couple questions. I do see them in the chat. I'll read out one. Whatever we don't get to, we'll put the information in the post recording email that will go out, and you'll see the chat. And so we won't, just to ensure that we won't miss anything. And if our speakers are so gracious, maybe we'll stay 1 or 2 moments longer. But let me get to the first question to read in the chat. How do we move from our local places thinking to global thinking? Does that get in the way of traditional respect and environmental stewardship thinking? So good question from independent to more community. And does that get in the way of traditional respect and the environmental stewardship movement?
I defer to Roman on this.
As Indigenous peoples, all of us globally come from an Indigenous background. There's not a race out there that doesn't come from an Indigenous background. And so if you look at worldwide, when we look at that thread, again, we have prophecy that talks about all of us, right? The Lakota people have it as the medicine wheel, the yellow, the red, the white, the black, and it talks about the 4 races of people. And this is how I'm understanding this question. So if I'm completely off of it, let me know. But we're all connected on Mother Earth simply by being human. That connection runs deep within all of us when you strip everything away. And so when you're looking at a small community doing work to restore or to bring back traditional knowledge or to do those things, that helps the broader world. And the way I see it as a lake, and each one of us as individuals are that pebble that gets thrown in a lake and you see the ripples. It doesn't matter how big that lake is, you can throw a small stone in there and it looks like it just ripples locally, but those ripples go throughout the waters of a lake. And so we have to see ourselves as individuals, as community, as being those ripples. And what are those ripples going to be? How does that look? Because we are all interconnected and we are all in this together. Kind of cliche to say it that way, but
No.
it's true.
No, it is beautiful because look, I'll just say this, it's the same message said so many different ways, and that takes many people that to hear it repeated in many different ways. So we have a couple more, but if if everyone would indulge me, I'd love to close the program, and then Roman and Coley, if you don't mind staying on for the last few questions in the chat, if that's all right. So grateful. Rebecca, if you don't mind just sharing slides one last time for our closing prayer. We always open and end all of our programs with prayers, reflections, and I thought this one was wonderful for tonight. And I'll put that link for our survey in the chat in just a moment. But we'll just go back one and just very Short and sweet with our state flower behind us. Hold on to what is good, even if it's a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it's a tree that stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it's a long way from here. Hold on to your life, even if it's easier to let go. Hold on to my hand, even if someday I'll be gone away from you. And yeah, this is Pueblo prayer, and it's a very short and beautiful one. I want to just take one moment, and if we could stop sharing. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And we'll just see everyone here. Great. So there were two more questions in the chat. And the next one came in. I've read that corn has special significance in some indigenous communities. Is that true for your community? And can you elaborate, Roman?
Corn is kind of a staple in a lot of indigenous communities. Now there was different types of corn. There was a winter corn, there's a summer corn, there's a fall corn. There's different colors of corn because as indigenous people, again, we traveled and our corn was not what you see today. What you're seeing a lot of today with corn is genetically modified foods. We're basically we're a science experiment in this whole system, right? And so you're not getting the nutrients that traditional corn did. And traditional corn would actually last a long, long period of time because we would dry it and then we could grind it, we could rehydrate it, we could do a lot of things with it. So yes, it was the main sustenance, a huge part of our traditional ways, and it's part of the Three Sisters, and yeah, it was a big part.
Thanks so much. And we are up at the hour. If I may, we're just going to close the program. I'll do one last check in the chat just to make sure that I didn't miss any questions. It looked like there was a lot of good conversation going on. So thank you so much for spending your Thursday evening with us. We hope to see you at the next one and have a wonderful evening.